G'day, this is Brian Medway from Crosslink Christian Network and Grace Canberra, by the way. And I'm talking in this session about your story, telling a story. I know we've talked about this a lot, but it's worth it. Let me tell you, it's worth it. And what's worth it is getting it right. I know that this is going to seem hard to do because there's something about practicing your story that makes it seem a little plastic or not working properly. But you just have to overcome that, because the fact of the matter is that even though your story is very natural to you, it isn't natural to other people. And certainly a story of some testimony about your experience of Jesus is definitely not common parlance in our society. So, we have to be aware of this, and so we have to learn how to tell that story well, just so that we can use it. It becomes a sharpened tool, and but there's no doubt about it that your story is an excellent tool. It's an excellent natural tool. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to be anybody else. It's not coming from anywhere else. It's actually happening to you, and you're the person who's representing the great good news of God in some relationship situation. And we're talking here about situations where the people you're talking to are people you know. And this is where it's even more important to be able to just simply tell your story. There's always more than one story. And I've talked about the fact that, I've got at least 5 stories that I tell people, and I know how to tell those stories well. I know how to connect to make it work so that it's simple, it's sharp, it works toward an end, and we've talked about that in previous sessions. But to make your story usable, it needs to be short, so you have to practice short. The shorter the better. Like I do have a 3-minute version. I have a 90-second version. I have a 20-second sub-editor, subheading, and I have a 3-second heading. Headline. So in all these stories. So the only way to get that to work is to make it part of your life, and the only way to make it part of your life is to practice it. Now, here is Jennifer Long. Jennifer Long is from the Harvard Business. Where is she? Harvard Business. I don't know. Business Publishing, Corporate Learning, and she tells this stuff about how it's hard. This is a leadership. This is a business management course, and she says that leadership, especially people who come to positions of management. Now, I know that we're not all in positions of management, but I'm just saying that it's hard to practice because managers usually have, over the time of learning to be a manager, they have practiced a whole bunch of things. And so for a manager to sit down and say, I've got to practice this new skill, that's a big deal. And so she talks about why that's important. And I think it's true in this case. It's true for you and your story. And once again, this time it might seem a bit boring in terms of how we repeat this, how we practice it. But believe me, when you get there, when you get in a situation where you're segueing into telling your story, you do this all the time, because when you talk to your friends and so forth, they tell a story, you tell a story. That's the way it is. That's the way life works. And so this is simply fitting in the gospel, a gospel story, the gospel as a story, let me put it that way, into the normal cultural pattern. In the normal cultural pattern of Paul's day, they had synagogues and they had synagogue meetings. And so Paul went along to synagogue meetings, and he was pitching a story they hadn't heard, an amazing story that the Messiah had come to Jewish communities all around the Mediterranean world. But he was doing it in the way that was custom. When he got to Athens, where did people tell stories? In the marketplace. They told stories in the marketplace. So he went to the marketplace, and then he went to Areopagus and talked there because that's where they heard all sorts of new fangled ideas and so forth. So this is normal. So we have to find some way of bringing this into normal, because the devil, the person who is opposed to the powers of darkness, opposed to the purposes of God, they have tried to push this away behind some closed doors and never to come out. Don't you come out. Don't you talk about that when you do come out. You talk about everything else, but don't talk about this. So we have to, challenge that idea with a new idea. But we just need to do it in the cultural norm. Paul says on one occasion, I become all things to all men. I figure out what the cultural norm is. So to a Jew, I become like a Jew because I know how to do that. To a Gentile, I become like a Gentile because I know how to do that, etc., etc., etc. So that's what we're doing. That is what we're doing. And so Jennifer Long says that the important thing about practice is that you acknowledge that it's going to be a challenge. You say to yourself, this is going to be a challenge, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep it. This is important, so I'm going to do it. So you simply put out there on the table before you openly the facts. Okay, I'm not used to doing this. We haven't done this before or whatever, but I'm going to do it now. If I'm going to learn, in fact, I've just recently or a little while ago bought a tenor ukulele, and I didn't play ukulele before, and so I have to practice the ukulele, and it's different. I'm used to playing a guitar. I can play a guitar without thinking, but I can't play a ukulele without thinking. It's new to me, and so because it's a new skill, I need to practice that. And guess what? I can tell the difference between a ukulele chord and a guitar chord. I don't get them mixed up. Because when I'm with a ukulele, I'm used to playing ukulele chords. When I'm with a guitar, I play guitar chords. And so this is just what I mean. So it's just practice. So it is totally normal. It's just that we have to do it deliberately. And please, 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 please practice. Please practice. Practice makes permanent. Practice itself doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And so only perfect practice makes perfect. And so that's why we need good feedback. We need to practice in the company of somebody who will give us qualified, or at least can give us good feedback. Not somebody who's going to say, "Oh, Brian, you're wonderful." My mother thinks that. She's in heaven now, but so I don't need that. What I need is, you could do this and this will improve that, and so forth. Allocate time. Allocate time. Just choose a few things to practice, like choose the shortness. Write it out, edit it, bring it down, get it down to a number of words, 120 words a minute. So you got, in a 3-minute testimony, you got 360 words. So count your words, and then read it, and then read it a number of times, and then get the hang of it, and then write little headings, and just have it on a little card, and tell your story from your headings. Now, you might think that makes it false. No, what it makes it is easy to understand. That's what it makes it. Use resources, use your spouse if you have one. Use your family, use your friends, use the church. Tell stories in the church meeting, but see how you go. Do it with a review, some feedback in a Bible study group or whatever. But get the right feedback. You got to think yourself into the system, not of somebody who knows all the jargon, but somebody who doesn't know any jargon. So when you're going to tell your story in a Bible study or something like that, or around the kitchen table, saying, "I want you to listen as if you know nothing about Christianity." And so listen to somebody who is, and see if I can tell it in a way that makes sense. So practice partnerships. When you're doing gym and running and all those other things, it's great to have a buddy. So get a buddy and work on the buddy system. Okay, so finally, I want you to think about how to use stories. So we've talked about this before, but I want to just reiterate this. Listen to other people's stories. Remember we talked about we sit around. Friendship means telling stories. This happened, that happened, something else happened. Okay? So listen to people's stories and look for the segue. Segue, remember that word? Segue. Yes, you do, because it's an unusual word and it's got an even more unusual spelling. Learn to pick Possible segues. Go to a conversation, sit in somewhere where you're talking to people who haven't had an experience of Jesus, and just listen to them talking and sort of try and pick up on the segue even before you start doing that. So when you actually jump in and tell your story somewhere, you've practiced finding a segue. Remember, Jesus found segues. He found segues into people's ordinary life stories. He didn't ask them to, come somewhere different or be someone different. He came to them right where they were. Use your headline and your sub-headline. Your headline and your précis. Learn to move on if nothing's happening. You just use your headline, figure out whether anything's going on there, figure out what their response is. If there's no response, nothing happening. If they've shut the door on that, we'll just move on, because you're going to be there some other time, and you don't want to tie this down to one, once only. I get one chance at this and then I'm gone. And then when you learn all those things, then practice figuring out whether you need to ask the question and say, how did that affect you? How did you feel about that story? Just something that allows them to register what impact it had in their lives. So this is how you do it, and this is why it's important. So, ways to practice: write it out in full, read it out aloud, critique it yourself, and put it through a checker, to check the grammar and all those other things, But get it written out, then read it and read it and read it to somebody else. Let somebody read it to you. Have a listen to it, then summarize it, then work off the summary. Then when you've worked off a summary, chuck the summary away and see if you can do it without the summary. Once again, I reckon you need to say, I'm gonna tally up 5 hours of practice in this. Now, I reckon it's minimum. I could say more, but 5 hours. That is 20 days where you do 15 minutes practice. Please believe me. I know this is counterintuitive. I know it seems a bit strange, but please believe me, this is the way it works. And if you get this down, you'll have tools to use, and you won't just miss opportunity after opportunity to say something to somebody which would bring them into the place where they can access a relationship with Jesus. God bless you.